Hi all. We are now in the Ask the Experts section in the MPC Alliance Data Privacy Summit for today. I will be joined here by a number of people who will be answering your questions on various aspects of MPC. First, let me introduce Eric Tobenek from Meta, Triin Siil from Cybernetica, Frederick Jansen from Magnite, Fabio Ricciato from Eurostat and the European Commission, with Professor Nigel Smart from KU Leuven, and the President of the MPC Alliance, Mr. Frank Wiener. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and thanks for being with us throughout the event. We already heard from Fabio in one of the keynotes and Triin in one of the panels, and we are now going to expand on several of the topics that we discussed there. So first of all, there was an interesting idea raised, and we already have questions that have been coming in over the event, so we'll start exactly with those. But I remind everyone who is listening that you can call in and you can also send your questions in via text. Just look at the event website. There's a call-in number. Our operators are waiting. So, Fabio, you proposed that there could be an MPC as a service platform, and that would simplify the use. You could build like institutional trust, maybe even into the system. So MPC people always use cloud as a motivation. So you want to protect data from the cloud, but in reality, you will need multiple clouds. So do you have an imagined solution on how this could work in Europe or in the worldwide web?
Well, as I tried to explain in the talk, avoiding a single point of trust is a requirement, is a designed requirement. If you want to go for cloud, which is not necessarily the way to go, maybe one possibility is to have servers hosted in the IT environment of the institutions that play the processing party role, institutions or organizations. If you want to rely on cloud, some of the server may run on different cloud. And again, differentiating, imposing the cloud diversity would be a requirement. I think there are different solutions how to do so. What we need to be clear is about the requirement that we want to achieve. And in this vision that we are proposing, that we are developing and conceptualizing here in Eurostat, but this is also part of a work done in the context of a UNIC project on input privacy. So it's not just Eurostat that is thinking around this concept. So we are proposing this as a vision, as a concept, to discuss with other stakeholders about what are the best way to fulfill these requirements. And in the consultation, we will also, in the process, we will also like to consult data protection authorities, eventually even civil rights activists, how they see. So I'm not here to propose a fully fledged solution, but I'm trying to steer the work in a certain in the direction of this MPC as a privacy, because I think MPC as a service, because only in this way I think we can get the strongest, the most robust possible solution at an acceptable cost and without requiring prospective users to become expert in MPC deployment and implementation. So I don't think these are requirements of avoiding. If you are clear that you want to avoid a single hand to control the whole process, there are multiple ways to achieve this goal. But we should clarify the requirement at this stage, in my opinion.
In the first panel, we had Mr. Mark Craddock previously from the United Nations Global Platform. So the question is exactly, if we want to build this this kind of a system, planet scale, then should we leave it to some worldwide organizations, or should we leave it to the Web3 ecosystem, who are also making significant progress in that direction? So I know that cryptographically, Nigel, you've been doing a lot in bringing the applications into real world, having launched several companies around MPC capabilities. So do you think, how can we scale this up? Does this as a service idea excite you?
I really like the MPC as a service idea. I think the issue is how do you do this from a business perspective? I see that from the, like, for government data point of view, it makes sense because you could have individual governments run their own government clouds, and the own government clouds could share data. So you could kind of imagine that situation. But on a commercial level, how would you provide MPC as a service to other entities? So who would be the people providing the service, given MPC is about splitting data up or distributing it around different roots of trust? So how you do that? And I think I think it's not so much it is a bit of a technical issue always to get MPC solutions to work. But I think actually an MPC as a service from a commercial point of view is really, it's a human issue, it's a business process issue, it's an economic issue. And I think that's a kind of, how do you do that? Are solutions like Partisia blockchain, which I think Frank can talk to, are they the ways to go forward, or are there other kind of ways of Google and Meta and Amazon combining together to provide this service? Who knows? But I think actually it's an interesting economic and business question, more than a technical question at the moment.
So how can we get all these parties to combine? So Nigel very gracefully mentioned Meta here, and we have Eric from Meta luckily here. So Eric, how can we make this happen?
Sure. So we've been investing in technology where we would be running the MPC like directly with a business partner that we are doing with. We call that private computation. We have an open source implementation of that. So any two businesses can sort of do that directly, which is not the sort of as a service version that you're talking about. But then we're also working in the W3C and in the IETF, where there are standards that sort of assume that some sort of service layer will be available. And so the way that we abstract that is we call it sort of a helper party network. And there we just sort of make the assumption that there are going to be companies that in the W3C case, it's the browser vendors that have to trust that they're simply not colluding. And so we already have some indication that some companies may be willing to do this. So in the IETF, which is a little bit more of a networking layer, the Internet Security Research Group, which runs Let's Encrypt, that is the certificate authority for most of the web, has already been working on this service. It's called Divvy Up, and they're working on a standard for how that could work. We've also seen companies like Cloudflare being very active in that space. So I think that as the demand grows, we will see companies stepping in to sort of create these networks, because there's going to be money to be made.
Which brings me to an interesting follow-up question. And I know that we are a little bit low on public sector representatives here. So, but I'll pose that question to several of you. Is there any advantage in industry or the public sector leading in adopting MPC? Is this already a set stage? Does it even matter? So, Fabio, as the public sector representative, do you have a position? An unofficial one.
Unofficial. Well, I think both. Of course, you need two legs to work. No, so the deployment will go. Both the public and the private sector have their homework and have their part to contribute. Complementary. So I think the business model. So Nigel was mentioning the business model. in certain area of government, like in official statistics, for instance, there are already, let's say, infrastructure that are developed by government, by statistical office, and used by statistical office. So there, the private sector contributes with technology, not with a service offering. So it's not a service that is offered commercially, and that's fine for this niche, for a certain part of the public sector. So you don't have a business model in the commercial sense, because those that develop, deploy, maintain are maybe public, a consortium or a network of public institutions, like in Europe could be the European Statistical System, which is exactly a network of public institutions, and the private sector would contribute with technology. Already this somehow could help to solve some technical, maybe also some legal aspect, to clarify some issues at the edge between technical and legal compliance, which needs to be worked out. Might also contribute to create trust if things are done properly in this model, and then maybe a similar model, but not exactly the same model, could be replicated or could at least give inspiration for similar model in the commercial sector. In this sense, you use the public sector where certain things are easier, in the sense, in the public sector we don't have to keep the analytic function secret, for instance. In the public sector, we maybe don't need a commercially sustainable business model in the sense that you understand it in the private sector. So it could serve like as a test bed for sorting out technical legal aspects, which might also contribute to flourishing similar or maybe not so similar MPC model in the business, and the other way around. And also, the more adoption is there in the business, the more also the public in the business sector, the more also the public sector benefits somehow indirectly. So I don't really see a leading role. The engineering requirements are different in the public sector, in the private sector, and within each sector. So in the business sector, for instance, also different business markets. Business sector might have let's say different rules, different size of stakeholders, different business case. I think from the public sector, we can contribute at this stage, and we are willing to take steps in this direction. This MPC as a service within the public sector, as I wrote in the slides, not as a commercial service, but as a service made, developed by public institutions with the help of technology vendors for public institutions, is a first concrete step to unlock the adoptions in the public sector. But I'm not saying that this is let's say the perfect solution in each and every application field.
There's
so
several things.
Yes, I would like to see the private sector and the public sector, let's say, as two different arena with different mechanics, with different stakeholders, and we should not have one waiting for the others. So I think we should progress in parallel, acknowledging the differences in the business dynamics.
Thank you. There's so much to follow up here on. Before, you mentioned legal aspects. We'll spend a ton of time on those. Then, just as an example, hospital networks are some of the pioneers of rolling out MPC and similar technologies right now, like the Swiss Personal Health Network, doing very awesome things already. So sort of like-minded organizations with similar interests might just start building MPC networks among them and then run their various services on top of that. So we just should give them the tools. So Frederick, in your work, you're also bringing companies together. So how do you see this progressing? Are you building a network, or what is your model for bringing MPC into the real world?
I think for us specifically, it's about solving a direct use case, partially driven by societal pressure and also partially driven by new legislation, which has to do with individual data privacy of users being tracked on the internet, users being followed everywhere. It's very much an incremental step. Where we're not. I'd love to see a model. We talked a little bit about public versus private. The way I see things moving right now is it's large corporations, mostly in the ad tech space, that are trying to figure out a model where it decreases maybe their own liability and provides value for shareholders, but it's not a model where, or not yet a model where, individuals retain the right to their own data. I as an individual can't say or have a hard time saying I would like to not be part. My MPC shares should no longer be used by certain companies because I would no longer like to be part of an MPC computation. So it's very much in a way, top-down driven model. I know that I think it was Partija, who has the social network that is more, you control your own data and you control, you because it is value that you bring, you can also monetize your data in that sense. I'd love to see the industry move towards that more so than, as a reaction to people are upset that they're, being tracked. So we're going to, try to bring privacy to the table, because in the end, people are, data is still being collected on a large scale, and it's still being monetized in the same way, but now it's under a veneer of privacy on top of it, which I think is a good step in, it's a step in the right direction. At least, it's much better than what we had before, but I don't think it goes far enough. I think, there needs to be an additional push. And I think that is probably going to be government-led. I don't see companies altruistically saying, we're going to give up our very lucrative business model and do better than what we've been doing before. I think it will take things like GDPR, CCPA to force companies to adhere to a different business standard ultimately.
Very, very, very good. You also mentioned legal aspects. So now we have to tackle them. It's like it's come up several times. Triin, so there was a question which directly had this, and I quote, "Lawyers don't understand how MPC works," in it. Is that true?
Well, you have to give them a chance. And I have to admit, I'm a lawyer who I hope at least somewhat understands what MPC is and how it works, but I have been given lots of chances to do that because Cybernetica hired me to get an understanding from the legal perspective how MPC fits into the data protection framework and other legal aspects as well. And I'm very thankful for that. I have had the chance to work with some of the top engineers and architects in Estonia, and not to mention privacy engineering experts. So I think I've learned tons over the past 5 years, but it's been 5 years. And I think not many lawyers have that chance, not to mention that they barely probably have heard about what is a privacy enhancing technology and what are the different subdomains or different sub-approaches. And I guess it's also important, for me, it's important to bring out that MPC is not just a technology. It's actually a whole organization and thinking of how you approach data, how you manage that, how you control that, and how you share control. And there's so many things that lawyers need to grasp before they can start even forum positions. So yes, I think it's important to educate, to work with lawyers, and to engage them from the early stages on, because otherwise they will be typically the last ones to come on board and discover, oh wow, this is wrong, that I don't understand, let's do that different way, and this is again ending up in a typical blame against lawyers trying to cut everything off. But if you bring them on board early on, if you engage them really in the team, if you allow them to take responsibility of how we understand MPC and what are the legal liabilities and possibilities, then I think there will be much more team players with the whole community.
So we have here a number of folks who are deploying privacy technologies. So let's go in order. Fabio goes first, and Eric and Frederick get ready. Because are you including lawyers early in the process? Fabio goes first.
Yes, just want to complement it in the same way that maybe lawyers have to grasp more of what the technology, what the technology can do, not necessarily how it does it with the bits, but at the same time, I wish there is also maybe an effort from the technologist to maybe reinterpret what the technology can do with the terminology of the lawyers. So me not being a cryptographer, not being a lawyer, so I know equally bad GDPR and MPC protocols. I see that these things have a lot to say to each other. So the GDPR is about being clear about who controls, giving safeguards about purpose limitation, data minimization, storage limitations. Yes, maybe the underlying idea of data is not so advanced. The fact that data is just as an object that can be moved, it has to be protected, while data can be diluted, it's not just a physical object. Maybe this is behind, but the fact that at the end of the day, we don't want to forbid the reuse of personal data, but we just want to be clear about declaring who is using, having checks on the purpose, having limitations, etc. And this is all stuff that is in the spirit of GDPR, and that the technology can very well deliver. So not only let's say I wish Cybernetica would recruit all the lawyers in Europe, for 5 years in order to allow a better education on the lawyer side, but maybe the message the opportunity I see for the technology is to read GDPR as it was the list of requirements of your customer, and try to develop the technological solutions in order to show that, hey, purpose limitation in the context of MPC means this and that. Storage limitations in the context of MPC is achieved in this and that way. So you bring the MPC to the lawyer terminology rather than, let's say, well, this is an alternative to employ all lawyers for 5 years.
Right.
But up to you, Dan, which way you prefer to go.
We'll have to find a more scalable way. So how do we, is GDPR a list of engineering requirements, Eric?
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have a good answer to that question. I will say that, I think this is an ongoing conversation, right? We have to continue to try and inform and educate folks on how these technologies work so that they can be taken into consideration to achieve, what Fabio is saying is the spirit of GDPR. The spirit of it is important. The ways in which we, are able to achieve that can grow over time. So I hopefully this is an ongoing conversation, and it probably won't happen overnight.
Surely so, but it's certainly that advertising and ad tech are high value business cases. right now in that sense. So certainly I can see there's a value in looking at ways how to optimize that or how to bring compliance with US or other territories' regulations. So Frederick, do you have a Magnite perspective on this?
I think in my experience, which has not been super extensive, but I've had various conversations with our lawyers, both at Magnite as well as in previous jobs and positions that I've held. Overall, I would say that lawyers are very conservative and will err on the side of caution, even when it comes to things that to me sound obvious in a way. We've had lots of discussions about the use of terminology, the word upload when it is, not data, but it is secret shares, right? The term upload might imply that you're actually sending data somewhere, but you're not, you're splitting it into secret shares. And so what's the correct terminology to use there when you're crafting, user policies and data use agreements? In other ways, encrypted data, if it is let's say it is a secret share or it is encrypted with a key that you don't have, having access to encrypted data, in our experience, lawyers have been very risk averse there as well, even though we can't do anything with it, and it is just random data for us. They've been like, well, but you still have something, right? And I understand their aversion, because even if it is secret shares, even if it is split amongst multiple parties, nothing in MPC says that I can't run a min-max query on this data, right? It's not because the data is secret shared that I can't say, give me user ID 1, give me the one with the highest age, which will return, maybe an exact row. And so I think the ecosystem is not quite there yet to solve this problem of, we're going to wrap it in legal language and it'll be fine. Like, it's not just MPC versus the legal constraints or the legal appreciation of what MPC does. I think it goes, it needs to mature with the maturity of the tool sets around MPC, which is going to be, how do we set policies so that, queries that reveal individual rows would not be possible, et cetera, et cetera.
So the good thing about MPC is that you will have multiple parties enforcing those policies, which is actually something that's not there for FHE or some other techniques. So that's an upside for sure. But in today's panel discussion, I think we had what was the wording? MPC as a weapon, or MPC chip solving anything wonderfully. I think it was Michael Jensen in the second panel said that there will be no, or was it Louis? Anyway, the point was Louis, yeah. So there will be no MPC chip that makes every application secure, or will there be? Nigel and Frank, so how do you feel about this? Nigel.
Okay, so we get a lot of people come to us with applications or potential applications, and they kind of go, we've got the spin is always this. Company comes in and says, we've got this application which breaks someone's privacy. Let's put some magic privacy enhancing technology, pixie dust, over the application, and suddenly everything will be all right, and we can still break people's privacy. If the application by definition breaks someone's privacy, no matter how much pixie dust you put on top of it, you're never going to stop the leakage of the private information. So the whole point is privacy enhancing technologies doesn't actually it enhances privacy. It doesn't stop privacy leakages. If you compute something that reveals someone's private information, like someone just said, if you said reveal user number A's name, if you reveal user number A's name securely, you still reveal user number A's name. So I think what you have is that privacy enhancing technologies they're not a magic bullet. They don't solve all problems. In fact, a lot of applications which companies are doing by default actually break people's privacy. So it's why, I and others we don't like the term privacy enhancing technologies. What we prefer is the P should stand for partnership enhancing, because it's about bringing people together, not about applying pixie dust on applications which shouldn't have been deployed in the first place.
Right. So it's about terminology. Frank, We've been discussing terminology in the MPC Alliance. How can we fix that? I think whenever we talk to industrial analysts about MPC, they don't fully grasp whether it's a specific cryptographic algorithm or if it's an application or what is it.
I agreed, and I was going to chime in earlier on the discussion or the comments from Frederick in the context of when it comes to legal, terminology is everything, right? It's essential. And so that's one of the areas that in the MPC Alliance, we feel like there's a great opportunity for us to bring some terminology forward and put it forward from an independent organization like the MPC Alliance to start to define certain terms to help for legal definitions and the whole regulatory and policy and everything that comes from that. One of the things I wanted to highlight here is we're going to be kicking off an initiative around this here in the MPC Alliance in the next month or so. So companies that have a vested interest in how certain things are defined and how those terms are specified, we invite you to contact us at the MPC Alliance and participate and contribute because we want this specification document that we come forward with to help propose some terms be representative of not just the perspective of a few people, but multiple organizations, more of a united perspective. Because we view that as critically important in defining standards, defining regulations, and everything that's required to move this technology to the broader adoption.
Okay, that's indeed a good plan. We'll be pulling together information from other standards that we heard about today. We had Ryo Kikuchi from Entity Labs, who is one of the editors of the MPC standard in ISO. Eric told us about their Meta's work in standardization. We'll probably have to try to bring that together. I guess it will, in the worst case, it will end up like the XKCD comics, so there's a new international standard to join the previous ones. But it is, I feel as if it's the job of the MPC Alliance to try to let's least bring all the parties together and maybe then feed it back into the standards bodies. So in collaboration, we can get it to work. But now we have had a number of questions which are obviously from the cryptographers among us. So let's go for those. And pardon for those people who don't have the necessary training, this might sound like pixie dust. So Nigel, this one's for you. Can we somehow outsource the expensive ZK snark, that's a zero knowledge technology for the mortals among us, computation, because if you don't want to disclose your witness, but you don't have a computation power on your edge device, then, or in your browser, can you somehow make this work in an outsourced setting with secure computing?
Okay, so this is something that Dan mentioned in some sense in his talk. What he said is that you could execute the proof. So what is a proof? A proof is that I prove to you that I know something, which is a kind of privacy enhancing technology. So imagine that I know the solution to some equation. I prove to you I know the solution to the equation without revealing it. Okay, so this is what you kind of do. This is what a zero knowledge proof does. And so Dan's application was between banks. They all have different, they want to prove something, and to produce the proof, they execute an MPC computation because it's their private data goes into the prover to do the proof. And what he said was, which was quite interesting, was that the MPC additional cost is minute in comparison to the cost that it actually takes to produce the proof. So Dan's question is the question from the audience is basically, what happens if my browser is the one with the secret and I need to produce the proof? Can I outsource it? Well, yes, you could, but it doesn't really gain you anything. In some sense, your browser no longer has to produce the proof. You've outsourced it to an MPC engine that produces the proof, but it's still just going to take just as long for that MPC engine to produce the proof as you, apart from the fact your browser's slow compared to something else. So it doesn't, it doesn't make the proof go faster, it just makes the proof go slightly slower. but over a distributed environment. So I think that's it's how you use it, how you use the zero knowledge. But there are other techniques. For example, these are for the ZK Snarks, where it takes a long time to prove something, and then you get a very, very short proof at the end. There are other solutions that have been used in DARPA programs. For example, there's the mac and cheese algorithms that come out of Aarhus, where you're not so much worried about a fast verifier. And there you can do all sorts of stuff with MPC to do distributed proofs and stuff, and you don't get such a big blow up.
Eric, you wanted to follow up on that?
Yeah, so I think there's an important point here. Even if the zero knowledge proof is slightly slower on the servers, this might actually be more aligned economically with what we want. So we have to think about where the cost is born. So in the advertising industry, you have like advertisers paying publishers to show ads through usually some, multiple steps of people taking some cut. And so there's an economic flow, and you essentially want to bear the cost on that flow of money and not infer that cost down onto the user. So if what we want to avoid is having a lot of really expensive computations, slowing down people's devices, draining their batteries, ultimately like reducing the overall life of that device, and instead bear that cost on the flow of money that is already happening. And so you can do that by moving that computation sort of up into an MPC that the sort of advertising chain has to pay for, because you also get essentially a tragedy of the commons, right? If all of those different advertising networks are able to shunt that cost onto the user, well, they're going to do that as much as possible because they're not paying for it at all. But if they have to pay for it by pushing it up into some sort of MPC computation, then they will use it sparingly. They will only use it to the point where it's economically viable. So I think even if it is more expensive in aggregate, it's actually beneficial because it aligns the incentives in the place you want them.
Frederick, I remember correctly that you were part of a team that has rolled out the MPC in browsers, and that was a very, very successful lightweight deployment. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I don't have the economic perspective maybe that a company like Meta has on this, so I can't say that they're wrong. I think devices have become so powerful, and a lot of the computations that can be done, on edge devices, I actually think should probably be done on edge devices, precisely for the point that was brought up in the last comment that was made, which is, it incentivizes companies to use it as sparingly as possible to keep costs down. And maybe that's not the right incentive for a company to have. Maybe the right incentive is for an end user to keep that little bit of extra control and say, no, I'm willing to bear this cost. I'm willing to have my battery go down 1% to use this broadly and not just in at the few times where a large advertising company thinks they'll make money off of it. So I'm not sure I fully agree with that. Browsers are slow, but you can do WebAssembly in the browser now, which doesn't bring it quite up to C speeds, but gets you close enough that there's a lot of fancy things that you can do in the browser. And I think it's an underutilized platform, to be honest, for these kinds of computations. There's a lot of really basic cryptography that adds value. Like our first deployments with the Boston Women's Workforce Council was additive secret sharing. That's it. Very simple computation, but you don't need, for what we were trying to achieve, the browser was the perfect platform. Even though, from the cryptography folks that we spoke to at the time, it's not novel, right? It's like 1970s technology. There's nothing interesting happening there when it comes to crypto, but it was still the right solution for the right problem, and so that's what we went with.
Joshua Barron in our first keynote today also highlighted the Boston Women's Workforce Council application as a great example how some of the simplest things can get deployed first if done properly, and they can actually pave the way for everything else to come. So let's go on with the crypto questions. And these are, yes, sorry, Frank, please.
Dan, before you jump on, I was just going to highlight that obviously today's panel session is all around the privacy aspects of using MPC. But at the end of the day, it's about creating value for the client or the organizations that are using the technology. And they'll determine where to use, how to deploy the technology that's going to add the most value for them. And so back to MPC and MPC adoption, one of the applications where we're seeing MPC being broadly adopted, where literally thousands of companies are now using MPC, many of which who aren't aware of it, is in the cryptocurrency space, where MPC is being used to secure the private keys that are used with the wallets that are holding and trading cryptocurrency. And in many of those applications, in some cases, one of the key shares or some of the MPC computation is actually occurring on mobile devices. And in that model, the model is such that an exchange can't be made without that client participating and approving that transaction. So that's one where the minor burden of carrying that computation on that local device is trivial, but the value that it adds for the client is material. And so it's a very logical approach. So it's always about creating value for the customer and creating value in the ecosystem. I just wanted to chime in on that one. It's kind of master of the obvious.
No, that was a great intervention. Thank you, Frank, and I agree with you fully. So we had a speaker from NIST, and NIST this year has made it famous by publishing finally the post-quantum cryptography standards. Nigel, do we need post-quantum MPC right now, or will we need it in the future?
We have post-quantum MPC right now. Almost every MPC protocol that I could think of. We saw these things come up in the chat. We've got a advance warning of the questions, and so I've been trying to think since the advance warning of is there a practical MPC protocol where the MPC itself is not post-quantum. And generally speaking, if you're doing an MPC for privacy applications, almost all of the protocols either involve secret sharing, or they involve sort of YAO circuitry, or they involve homomorphic encryption. And those three types of technologies are all post-quantum. The only application really where your MPC is itself not post-quantum is when you're trying to secure a non-post-quantum threshold signature scheme. So if you're trying to do a signature scheme which is itself not post-quantum, then your MPC is generally not post-quantum. But then again, the system is itself not post-quantum, so it doesn't really matter. So in some sense, we are already at the point where from almost since day one, we're at the point where we have post-quantum MPC. There is the issue of how does the post-quantum part of the NIST business deal with the threshold part of the NIST business that's worried about MPC and thresholdizing cryptographic algorithms, and how those two dovetail together is a very interesting question which NIST hasn't quite addressed yet. So we wait with bated breath.
So I guess one of the things where we need to look at this is MPC often relies on secure channels, and for doing secure channels, sometimes the endpoints are still using RSA or elliptic curve cryptography for the public key crypto part. But that's sort of
that with post-quantum stuff, and it's easy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that would brings us to cryptographic agility, or the chance of actually swapping out cryptographic algorithms. And the next question, which is MPC using new crypto schemes, or that actually is an interesting question, because if you look at blockchain space, then they are using quite interesting hash functions because it gives them good performance. However, every now and then some of those get broken. So there have been some famous cases where some funky hash schemes have been broken, and as a result, it has been a problem. So should we be building enterprise MPC applications only on standardized schemes, or is there some design space where new cryptography could really speed up MPC?
It depends what you mean. So kind of like, so for one, building MPC on standardized cryptography is actually quite hard because very little of the cryptography that MPC is based on is standardized. There's very few standards for oblivious transfer. There's apart from a wonderful standard for ISO on secret sharing written by Dan, there is almost no standards on secret sharing. Standards for homomorphic encryption are only in their infancy. So a lot of the underlying cryptographic building blocks to build MPC solutions are not yet standardized or not fully standardized. And then you have that within the privacy enhancing technology box, there could be special cryptographic techniques inside that. So for example, we talked about snarks and starks, which often use special cryptographic hash functions, which are kind of like what's called MPC friendly hash functions. And these hash functions are also not standardized, but they're kind of intertwined quite closely with the final application. So I think there's a long way to go for standardization, because if you look at the NIST standards, they're just encryption signatures. If you look at ISO, they do a few other weird and wacky ones, secret sharing and other things, but we don't actually have standardized all the building blocks we need to build even the most basic MPC protocol. Just doing YAO circuits in a standardized way. You need OT, you need a way of doing encryption that's standardized, relevant for YAO, which is not one of the normal modes of operation. They're all basic stuff, but not been standardized.
Fair enough. And that is the end of our cryptographic minutes for today. So let's go for, I think, looking at the time, possibly a final round of questions. And this is actually about the drivers. So let's talk about drivers. And that's going to be coming to all of you. So I will be adjusting the question a little bit. Eric, let's start with you. So privacy technologies, you're working on them. What is driving you?
I mean, it's usually not just one thing. We're investing in a bunch of different privacy enhancing technologies, and we think that a combination of those technologies is going to help build the next generation of digital advertising. So I mentioned a few of these, but like we are working on, MPC to do sort of direct collaborations with business partners. We are working in the W3C and the IETF on standards for how web browsers work and can use these technologies to enable purpose constraint like measurement, for example, without enabling cross-site tracking. And then we're also working with the World Federation of Advertisers on a sort of industry-led system that does a different type of ads measurement and uses MPC to do very basic aggregation of like unique counts of people in like an advertising campaign. So it really comes down to like, what are these different sort of purposes and how can we build a system that is sort of purpose constrained to that?
But are you protecting the data of companies or individuals?
It depends on the context, right? I think we are able to accomplish both. And it depends on what is the goal of that specific use case.
Okay, that's to be expected because MPC can do both. Trine, is GDPR or CCPA or insert regulation acronym here driving MPC development or privacy technology development?
Well, I believe all laws by default try to be technology agnostic. So I don't think that any laws in the world currently are designed to promote MPC or any privacy enhancing technologies in any way. but at the same time, they do raise the level of requirements, the level of demand for technologies like MPC, and they also kind of help to build a more stricter culture around how we treat data, how we treat people whose data it is, and how we build protections or design protections for the people inside different solutions, whether be they private or be they public. So yes and no, but it depends very much on the user and interpreter of the law. So from my experience, from our experience, I would say that MPC and other privacy enhancing technologies beautifully can be fit into GDPR and other data protection frameworks if you want it to be fit there. But of course, it was interesting to see earlier in this panel, listening to the discussion as well, that in the technical community of MPC providers, it seems like they see the legislation more as an obstacle or inhibitor. But at the same time, from my perspective, or a privacy lawyer's perspective, we see it rather as a tool or as a protection measure under GDPR. And I think this is what Fabio is very much representing as well. And it's interesting to see how this kind of a conflict between these two approaches, where there should be none, but at the same time, it very well represents the paradox of these privacy enhancing technologies, that on the one hand, well, if we talk about them as privacy enhancing technologies, because Nigel said that he doesn't like the term, I don't like the term either, because these technologies can be used for so much more than just protecting privacy. But in any way, if you talk about them in the sense of privacy protection, then there's the paradox that on the one hand, they are designed to promote and work towards the same goal as data protection legislation. So we want better privacy for people, but at the same time, they are also subjected to the strict rules of this data protection legislation. And it is as hard for the MPC and other privacy enhancing technologies to meet those rules sometimes, because they too have to convince lawyers that, or their implementers have to convince lawyers that everything is fit for purpose and trustworthy and so on, because as you pointed out several times, even privacy enhancing technologies can be used the wrong way. But in the panel I moderated earlier, I think Louis Brandau very well brought it out that it's a concern that can be dealt with. So if we really want to adopt MPC in practice, and if we really want to build these ecosystems and make it a success, we need to build also these well, let's say control measures or filters or some kind of safeguards to make sure that MPC and other privacy enhancing technologies are not used the wrong way. And this is where standardization comes in. And this is where we have to probably do a lot of more work in the business side of things and in the organizational side of things, rather than the technical side of things, to find out what are the actual working models for what kind of problems these models help to solve, and how those modules when working for these or solving these problems actually, what kind of issues or vulnerabilities they have. So how can we kind of correct them or prevent leakages and failures from happening? And that's all possible to foresee, to predict, but I think it's a lot of work in the coming years for all of us.
We'll do that work. Frederick, so you have brought up the human aspect, sort of the person's own control aspect. So how can you see this interacting? Will I be using, should the person be the MPC endpoint, or should the service provider be one? So what makes sense for you?
I mean, it's a little bit of a philosophical question, I think, and I'm not sure if I can give a realistic answer as to what will happen. From a personal point of view, I prefer the Apple, and not to say that they're holy in all senses, but if I want to do facial detection of recognizing the pictures of my cats on my phone, I prefer the Apple approach of the model running on my device, and my pictures remaining my pictures, versus the Google approach of send everything in the cloud and we'll run it for you. You know, is that something that makes sense on a global scale? Do most people care about it? You know, I understand that a lot of the content that we consume on the web is free, and it is free specifically because targeted advertisements are a thing, right? I don't like to pay a subscription to every single website that I visit, and so you know, I don't like YouTube prompting me to buy YouTube Premium every other video that I watch. And so I understand that there is a need for advertisements and that this is something that is not going away anytime soon. So I think we have to be pragmatic. I think both will remain viable business models. Some businesses will do it in a centralized approach, and that is fine. As long as consumers have the option of saying, no, actually, I want to run my home server. I don't want to participate in this, you know, I want to pay for the websites. I don't want to be tracked. I want to use an open source browser that doesn't use, you know, XYZ. As long as people have that choice, I think, you know, we're not off to a bad start. And anything else that happens is kind of like the cherry on top. Realistically speaking, is the way things will probably go, is my guess.
Well, the complexity of today's IT infrastructure, I think, is beyond the grasp of many people already. But let's hope that the education, a key word in many of today's talks, will help us get there. Fabio, are you, when you're talking about MPC, are you protecting the people's data or are you protecting the government's data?
No, the people's data. I mean, the reason for looking at MPC, among other, say, what Nigel or Trine said before, make clear that MPC is not the solution. MPC is a part, a component of a solution, and when you need other components, at the policy, governance, etc. So I see MPC as a very promising component, not just the solution per se. So we are looking at these solutions because in the moment where official statistics would like to deliver more statistics to the society, so more timely, more relevant, you know, to scale up the information. This official statistics is information that is given back to the society, to the people. And in order to produce more and better statistics, we need to take stock of more data, more fine-grained data from the people. If we are moving in this direction, we need to scale up protection of the data of the people, protection against any possible misuse of their data, including bad government. So the government or government body that develop solutions that provide insurance also against the government itself is the maximum, I think, of the protection that you can offer to the people. But as I said, MPC is a wonderful thing, but it's just a component. There is much more to be engineered at the organizational level, also the architectural level, maybe also at the hardware level. So maybe you need different layers of solutions. I have a little doubt that MPC will be one of component of the solutions that the government will be using, hopefully tomorrow. I mean, as of today, you don't think of sending, you know, confidential data without some form of encryption. Even non-cryptographer who use encryption in daily life, right? I wish at some point it would be inconceivable that in order to produce some information from data that are in the hands of different organizations, you think of exchanging direct data. So it should be just the default option to just use some form of partnership enhancing technology, as Nigel Chapeau, I think a very nice, very likely way of capturing the essence of MPC at least.
Thank you all. I got inspired. So it's very sad that I have to now call this panel to an end. Luckily, we also ran out of questions. So for the closing words of the 2022 MPC Alliance Data Privacy Summit, I grant words to Frank Wiener, President of the MPC Alliance.
Well, thank you, Dan. And really, I want to thank all of you for participating today and investing your time. As we heard many times throughout the course of the day today, one of our big opportunities and challenges is increasing education and awareness around MPC. And that's a primary objective of what today was all about. So I want to invite you to invite others to watch this this recording of this event. It'll be available on demand, and as you know, it's free of charge. So please post and share it with your friends. I want to thank our panelists, starting with Dan. Dan is not only the panelist and the host for this event, but he personally led the planning and the execution around this entire event, and it's a monumental task. And Dan, you've done a wonderful job, and I thank you for that. But really, everybody here on the panel and throughout the panel's sessions earlier today, and all of our guest speakers, we really appreciate your contributions. Also want to acknowledge our sponsors. Without their support, we would not have been able to do this as a free event, starting with Meta. As a platinum sponsor, they've really been foundational to helping fund the whole year-long event series that we've had going on here. And so really appreciate their support. And also, again, Cybernetica, which is backing Dan. We really appreciate their sponsorship of this event as a gold sponsor. And Partisia Blockchain, who's another gold sponsor of this event, and an organization that has really been, as part of Partisia, a pioneering leader in this space. And Magnite, who's also a silver sponsor of this event, and has acquired Nth Party, which really brought the whole privacy enhancing angle to their advertising technology initiatives. As I mentioned before, this program and all of the prior episodes around MPC are available online for viewing on demand. And we encourage you to take that in and share it with others. And we also want to invite you to consider joining the MPC Alliance. As I mentioned, we have some really important and strategic work that we're going to be undertaking here in the coming months. And it's a perfect time to get involved with the MPC Alliance. And we invite you to visit us at mpcalliance.org for more information. So with that, again, thank you everyone for your time and attention, and I hope you have a great day.